me, Gus Cicala, President and CEO of Project Assistance, and Jim Colton, Practice Director of Portfolio and Project Management. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Gus Cicala founded Project Assistance in 1996 with the goal of transforming our clients' approach to portfolio and project management to deliver better, faster, more cost-effective project-based results. Gus is a recognized portfolio and project management expert who has published many popular articles and books on the subject, and is frequently asked to present and teach topics of interest around project and portfolio management. Gus?
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you everybody for attending our webinar today. I'd like to start off with a review of our agenda. The first thing we're going to talk about on this topic are the hotspots for issues in the professional services business around project management. Specifically, we'll talk about 4 primary focus areas in our agenda today. We're going to talk about pre-sales, we're going to talk about handoff, then we'll talk about delivery, and finally closeout from an issue standpoint. And once we talk about the hotspots, we're then going to turn our discussion from how to turn those hotspots into best practices and to provide solutions for how to deal with any of the hotspots we're going to talk about today. We'll do that in the context of an overview of the professional services delivery approach. And then we'll go through each of the 4 areas for pre-sales, handoff, delivery, and closeout to address those hotspots. Next, we'll talk about practical methods for change, some of the benefits, some of the challenges to striking the right balance, to implement some of the changes we're going to discuss today. Some of the best practices can be challenging, and many of you in the professional services business will certainly recognize these challenges. And then we'll discuss an actual change methodology that can be used by organizations to embrace the best practices that we'll discuss today. Finally, we'll provide a summary of the material, and as Daniel mentioned, we'll finalize with a question and answer session. So first, let's start off with discussing the hotspots for some of the issues. And the first one I mentioned was pre-sales. And one of the first hotspots we run into is this question of, are the subject matter experts, meaning the people who are usually involved in delivering the solution, going to be involved in the pre-sales efforts? And by pre-sales, we mean the effort that occurs from the time that an opportunity is identified or a lead comes available to the sales team through the time that a contract and a project is approved and put in place. So there's a question about the expectations being set with the customer by the subject matter experts that really understand the solutions. The next one is a lack of time and documentation in the sales process. So this whole idea of how a proposal gets developed, and is there enough time to be able to understand the client's needs, to develop the right approach, to come up with the pricing, to have the technical feasibility questions answered, to have the level of clarity the clients like to have. Following that, we'll talk about the differing motives between the salespeople and the delivery team, what I sometimes call the Stockholm syndrome, right? When a delivery team is embedded with a customer, the motives can sometimes be more closely aligned to the customer than they are to maybe the professional services delivery firm. And the question is, how do you align these motives? You know, the incentives may be different. You may have delivery people that have incentives for delivering a lot of hours. You may have salespeople that have a different incentive based on revenue instead of profit, for example. Insufficient input from the project management experts. So besides the subject matter experts or the technical subject matter experts, we also have this question about the project management experts, which would be responsible for the kinds of business controls we hope to see in any project, especially in a professional services project where we're talking about estimating labor, that oftentimes is how we measure revenue, oftentimes how we recognize profit based on the difference between the cost of our resources versus the revenue on those resources and whether or not there's actually leftover called profit. So if we don't have project management experts involved in the pre-sales process, some of those rigorous business controls may or may not be put in place to govern the rest of the project. And finally, customer responsibility. When we're in the sales cycle, one of the challenges we may have is a question about whether we want to bring up how much work the customer has to do. Right? So there's an expectation sometimes from the sales team that we don't want the customer to think this is hard. We don't want to bring up a lot of challenges or a lot of time that our customer will have to put on this project, or even just from a standpoint that even though we recognize that the customer has a lot of responsibility, that it varies so much from engagement to engagement that we have to, in fact, try to put more responsibility on the customer and be very clear about that. So the later stages of a project oftentimes are impacted by what happens in pre-sale. So there's a pre-qualifying process that's really focused on, can we win the project as a professional services firm? Is this business that we can have, that we want to have? And against that, when we look at what it takes to win it, are we willing to do what it takes to win it? Oftentimes there's a trade-off between profit and the actual ability to win the project. Can we lower the price, for example? If we lower the price, do we lower the scope, or do we keep the scope the same and therefore we give up profit? So what do we have to? What are we going to have to sacrifice in order to win the sale? And some of those sacrifices show up later during delivery, and if they're not reflected in the statement of work, or if a statement of work is either neglected in terms of the standards that the organization is trying to follow, or I call it neglect and abuse. If we're abusing the statement of work by not maybe fully filling out the assumptions or getting the estimates where they need to be in order to make this thing profitable, are we ready to have this thing set up properly so that we can win the business and do it profitably? So let's talk about hotspots in the handoff. So assuming we've gone through the pre-sales process, we've got this thing up to be winnable, we've won the project, we hopefully have it set up for profitability. Sometimes we see that some of the shortcomings in the pre-sales process start to rear themselves and become obvious during the handoff. So one of the things that can often happen when we get into the handoff is sometimes the organization we're dealing with, or the people we're dealing with from the customer side, the client side, may change faces. So we may be dealing with procurement, or we may be dealing with people whose job it is to define the needs of an organization, or just through change of roles, or the amount of time that has passed from the initial opportunity to the time that the project actually kicks off. There may be a lag that causes different people from different departments to come to the table, or even if the people are the same, what this slide says is maybe they don't work well together. So we can have dysfunction in the client organization, and oftentimes we may be brought in because there's a hope that an outside consultant can actually deal with that dysfunction, but maybe we're not even told about the dysfunction. So this can sometimes become obvious when we get to the handoff and we see how dysfunctional the organization starts to behave. The other thing that can happen is if we haven't had the subject matter experts at the table during pre-sales, or the project management experts, and now they're coming to the table during a kickoff, during a handoff, during an analysis of what the opportunity is, we may find that there's some things out of balance. There's some unrealistic aspects of the scope, schedule, resources, and client expectations. And finally, contract language doesn't always clearly articulate the client's needs. So by virtue of the fact that we have a statement of work with terms and conditions that have gone through back and forth sometimes between a professional services lawyers and a customer's lawyers, and things have been modified and changed, and just the nature of contract language itself sometimes can lead to some ambiguity. As much as contracts are trying not to do that, sometimes they actually cause it. Delivery. So this is what I call chickens come home to roost. So any of the shortcomings that have occurred during the sales process or during the handoff process, it becomes harder and harder as we get further into the project to ignore some of the realities of what might have not happened, or maybe did happen, in terms of the expectations and the pricing and the contract language and the scoping. And again, even with a perfect statement of work, scope creep happens, and even a client that's acknowledges scope creep, it has to be identified and managed, and even expecting scope creep can be disruptive. Expecting scope creep doesn't necessarily imply that we know when it's going to come along. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have to do an impact analysis. It doesn't mean that that the delivery team we have focused on delivering the primary solution isn't going to get distracted to ask to come up with new estimates, new approaches, new schedules. So at best, even well-planned scope creep creates issues for a delivery team. And this whole question about time and materials versus fixed price, I always love asking a group of professional services consultants, what's the difference between fixed price, or even better, to ask the question, what is the completion criteria for a time and materials project? And oftentimes I get an answer that sounds like fixed price, and oftentimes that expectation is driven from the client. Oh, well, time and materials, it's not over until we give everything we promised. Well, that sounds like fixed price to me, and it certainly is what clients are hoping for. So this creates some issues and some challenges we'll talk about in a few minutes. And aligning team behavior with profitability. Again, subject matter experts sometimes are consider themselves artists. They're engineers that want to build perfect solutions, and a statement of work and a contract may or may not have enough budget or have enough scope description to allow for that from the delivery team. So there can be misalignment, not only within the professional services team, but also from the client side as well in terms of what their expectations are. And all those things can affect profitability. And completing a project, from a delivery standpoint, is something we have to do in increments, right? It's not something where we can just wait till we get to the end and declare a project over, but there has to, oftentimes is not a culture built into project delivery that says that we're constantly letting the customer know what complete means, what done means, and continually, incrementally moving those markers towards the finish line. And finally, from a closeout standpoint, meeting the contract criteria, are we able to do that? Was it stated clear enough in the beginning that we're able to do that? This issue about, we think we've delivered what we promised, but the customer doesn't think they got what they bought, and how do we resolve that? How do we reconcile the differences between what the contract said and what the customer is expecting? Follow up on out-of-scope activities. How does that happen? Oftentimes, things that are out of scope are needed at some level, so it needs to be dealt with. Handing off to a customer, is the customer ready? How do we get the customer ready? Are we waiting to the end to make sure the customer is ready? Has the scope addressed the kinds of things that the customer is going to need to be able to do to get ready? And finally, if we've been doing an ostrich act collectively as a professional services organization around some challenges around scope, around the estimates, around the quality of what's been delivered, around the fact that we're getting close to the finish line and maybe things haven't been properly tested, or the customer hasn't been involved enough, or we've made assumption about functionality and requirements and design points that may or may not be agreed to by the customer, now we see a snowball effect, right? This snowball really starts to accumulate a lot of weight at this point. It has a lot of momentum and can be difficult to challenge if we wait this long to address it. And so what I'd like to do at this point is turn the best practices conversation over to my colleague, Jim Colton. Jim, take it away.
Thank you, Gus. Appreciate that. So this segment of the webinar is going to focus really on best practices and how to deal with some of those key challenges that Gus just went through. I'll start with a quote here, and I think everyone would agree that the majority of successful organizations are very systematic. They have a repeatable way of doing things, and they avoid being people dependent. If you look at Bill Belichick as a football coach, he's been known to be extremely process-oriented, systematic, and when star players go down, he's been able to be successful just by plugging in the backup, and the team still performs very, very well. And we want the same approach to be successful as a project management organization as professional services. We need to be systematic, have repeatable processes, and be able to deliver more consistently. Just to give a context for some of our best practices, we'll share this pyramid where we have portfolio management at the top of the pyramid. And really, from a professional services perspective, that's looking at the pipeline of opportunities that are coming down and evaluating which opportunities are worth our investment, not only from a project delivery perspective, that we can be profitable, but which ones do we want to invest in from a pre-sales perspective, committing our time and energies and possibly not winning the deal. Project and program management is the project management controls that we put around a project in terms of delivering the project on time and on budget. And lifecycle management, you could refer to that as your service delivery approach or your product delivery approach, and what it takes to be on spec in terms of quality of the solution, as well as meeting the requirements of the customer. Typically, professional service organizations are very strong in this lifecycle management. They're very detail-oriented, understand the solution, how it's been developed, what they need to modify it to meet a particular customer need. So they become very, very good at that lifecycle management. Typically, we see the challenges around project and program management, where the expertise doesn't necessarily exist in-house or hasn't been developed yet. And these are the project management controls around delivering on time and on budget. I'm going to share a conceptual model of a professional services organization delivery. And we're looking at kind of three streams, either functions or processes. The first one being business governance, which is really how the organization runs its service offering practice. In terms of its practice management, what offerings they'll provide and offer to their clients, how they manage those offerings, how they enhance those offerings over time. The PMO or project management organization, how they put enterprise project management processes and tools in place to help with delivery. And then project governance is how to manage and control projects as they go through the delivery process. Engagement management is analogous to this project and program management. So this is how we initiate a project, how we plan for it, how we put controls in place to execute successfully, and how we close out a project. I'm going to drill down into each of these areas in a little more detail in a couple minutes. The third stream is analogous to lifecycle management. We'll call it solution deployment, which is just a generic approach to delivering the solutions. We have, for example, a 5-step or a 5-phase approach to solution deployment: discovery, design, develop, test, and implement. The key is to how do we integrate these functions as we go through delivery. And each organization is going to have a customized approach based on their own internal organization structure, as well as the specific customer needs. So just to double click on business governance, we've got practice management, which consists of business line management, running the business, the financials of the business, making sure we're profitable, keeping us profitable. Service offerings and research and development in those areas. How do we expand our service offerings to continue to meet customer needs? There's partner and internal group management support. Most professional services organizations have multiple partners that they'll team with to deliver unique solutions to customers. And also the management of other internal departments within the professional services organization. Sales management is obviously critical, keeping the pipeline full and determining which potential opportunities to invest in and hopefully bring to the finish line. The PMO will be methodology, standards, and best practices, both around your solution deployment as well as your project management controls. Project metrics definition. So how do we know that our projects are tracking as we plan? What are the key metrics that we put in place and monitor throughout the life of a project? Sorry about that. That was user error. Jumping back into our business governance approach. The last area within the PMO is portfolio and resource management. So how do we look at our pipeline of opportunities? How do we prioritize those? We can't work on everything. We can't go after every opportunity. So we have to have a way to measure the potential value and profitability of a solution, considering the long-term relationships with potential customers. And all that would go into making decisions on where to invest our time and dollars. Resource management is also critical for professional services organizations in terms of keeping our utilization high. Utilization is probably the biggest driver in profitability of a PSO. We want to make sure that we're applying the right resources to the right projects at the right time and have a really good handle on the supply versus demand of resources. Finally, project governance. How do we make sure that our processes are being adopted and utilized and standardized and ensure that projects are delivering on time, on budget, on spec. We have engagement management and solution deployment process adoption. So this is a measure of how well we're following our own processes. Are we utilizing good project management tools and techniques? Are we following our solution delivery processes? Are we delivering the right templates, using the templates to deliver our final work products, etc.? Process metrics. So how do we track the actual use of our method? How do we continue to improve our processes by gathering feedback through actual project delivery challenges? Finally, under project governance, we have project reviews and escalation. So some projects will be challenged for a variety of reasons. How do we be proactive in recognizing that we could have challenges on a project? How do we get the right resources involved to address the roadblocks? How do we escalate issues to the right level of management, both internally and with our customers, to make sure the projects are continuing to tracking as planned? Engagement management is really, again, around the project management controls. So we have the initiate stage of engagement management, where we're documenting client objectives, making sure we understand their high-level needs, defining the scope, both in terms of breadth and depth of scope. We're developing the project schedule and creating a project estimate in terms of cost. The planning stage, where we finalize the scope, continue to drill down and fully understand the customer requirements and needs. Develop a baseline schedule, which will be used for comparison purposes as we progress throughout the project. We develop the baseline budget in terms of cost, and we'll kick off the project. Talk more about these in more detail later. Execution phase is managing scope, schedule, issues, risks, change, and acceptance of deliverables. And we'll drill down in each of these areas in a few minutes. Finally, close phase of engagement management will be getting final from our customer in terms of what was delivered capturing lessons learned and disseminating them throughout the organization, and formally closing out the project. Solution deployment is the third major process that we shared up front in terms of best practices. Again, this is a generic approach that could be customized for each organization. This is following kind of a standard waterfall approach, although we may want to implement or execute an agile approach or something more iterative, which would be a variation of this waterfall approach. The discovery phase within solution deployment details the customer requirements, goes through an analysis of those requirements, begins to plan for testing, and finally obtaining the approval of those requirements from our customers. Design phase typically has a high-level design built into it to create a detailed design and finally obtain the design approval. Develop phase is development of not only the infrastructure to support the ultimate solution, but the solution itself. So that solution could be improved processes, it could be change to the organization structure, governance, procedures, etc. And finally, making sure that we're ready for testing. Testing consists of both an internal test, project team, as well as user acceptance testing, and then finally making sure that we're ready to release the solution to the customer. Common steps in the implementation phase is putting together a deployment plan, which has detailed steps in how we'll actually deploy this environment. Conducting training, both for the end users as well as for support folks and anyone that might administer technology. Ongoing support preparation. So how do we support this application or solution once preparation planning has to take place there? Deploy the system into the environment and finally obtain customer approval. I'm not going to go back specifically to some of the areas we talked about earlier. Gus mentioned in terms of pre-sales, handoff, delivery, and closing out a project. So conceptually, you can see how the pre-sales process will cut across three of these processes/functions. As I mentioned earlier, each organization will customize this pre-sales activity based on their own organization structure as well as potentially specific customer needs. The handoff process typically occurs, somewhere between initiation and crosses over into discovery. It certainly involves internal folks within the PMO and practice management organizations. Delivery is the heart and soul of delivering the solution, executing from a project management perspective, as well as developing the infrastructure and the ultimate solution. And closing out the project will be important. Again, we talked about capturing lessons learned, getting formal acceptance from the client, making sure met all the customer expectations. I'm going to go back and specifically address each of the initial issues that were cited by Gus. So of particular interest in the pre-sales process is the statement of work. I'm going to do a deep dive on this one, as this is probably the most critical document or work product that gets delivered throughout any engagement. Involving the delivery organization. So Gus had mentioned earlier, it's critical, especially for a large complex project, to get the right people from the delivery organization involved. Both from a subject matter expertise perspective as well as a project management perspective. Those folks are going to be the people that have delivered similar solutions in the past. that will really be able to leverage the lessons learned and bring a quality solution to the table. The initial estimate is really critical, particularly as we're locking in the contract. We want to modify the investment that we make in developing the initial estimate based on a variety of things. So Gus had mentioned fixed price versus time and materials. Certainly for a fixed price engagement, we want to invest more in the pre-sales process. It's going to be critical to clearly understand the customer needs and develop a solution or a high-level solution that will meet those needs. We also want to spend more time in estimating. As a fixed price engagement, the risk is really going to be primarily on us to deliver as planned. Customers shifted that risk from themselves to us, and we need to make sure that we're prepared. So particularly in a fixed price engagement, we want to have heavy involvement from the delivery organization. The other considerations are also risk-based. So I would say generally the higher the risk, the more we want to involve the delivery organization. We have a project that we've never really ventured down that path before. We probably want to bring in the experts that have done something somewhat similar. We want to make sure that we invest more time in something that's complex, very large, as the risk will increase with size and complexity. So in summary, during pre-sales, involve the right people, base the level of investment, depending on the risk of the project and the nature of the agreement, fixed price versus time and materials. I'm going to take a little drill down here into the statement of work. The statement of work should answer a lot of questions. First and foremost, why are we doing the project? What are the specific business outcomes that the customer is expecting by engaging us? What will we deliver? Specifically, what are the work products and ultimate solution that will come out of this engagement? When will we be done? Probably the toughest question to be answered about the engagement. And it takes time throughout the statement of work process. You really want to detail the deliverables, not only the interim deliverables, but the final solution. What's it going to look like? A variety of ways to do this. You can present, you can go through a prototyping process, develop a proof of concept, share similar solutions from other clients, maybe go to take a visit to another client potentially and look at what they've done. So whatever it takes to set really good expectations in terms of what you're going to deliver, should be done during the statement of work or pre-sales process. How will we do the work? So basically, what's our approach? Are we going to deliver a standard waterfall delivery approach, or do we need something more agile? Do we need to engage the clients through prototyping or conduct JAD sessions to flesh out requirements? There's there's a number of different techniques and approaches we can take. We want to apply the approach that makes most sense for any specific engagement. How much will it cost? And the more risky the project, the more time we want to spend to make sure we get the project estimate correct. What don't we know? So we want to answer not only questions about what we do know, but we want to identify what we don't know. And it's identify what we don't know. We have to make assumptions. We're early in the process, so we're not going to have the answers to every question. So in key areas, you need to make specific assumptions and review those with your customer, knowing that you probably won't hit all the assumptions correctly, and you can make adjustments later. We'll do the work. So not only internally within our organization as a PSO, but from our partner perspective, from a customer's perspective, it's important to define the roles and responsibilities of all engaged parties. When are we done? Gus mentioned earlier, what's that completion criteria? what's the definition of done? As much as you can flesh that out early in the life cycle, the fewer problems you're going to entail throughout the life cycle. What can go wrong? So here's where we want to start to identify risk. Within the statement of work process, at least the major risk that we think we might be confronted by. And we want to begin to mitigate risk where it makes sense and potentially build contingency plans for very critical risks. So the statement of work components are going to answer those questions. Start with an executive summary, a brief summary of the project, identifying the key objectives and business outcomes. Ideally, a business case will be included within the executive summary. We talked about deliverable descriptions, an outline and definition of all the deliverables. We talked about an approach. What's the plan of action for building the deliverables? Is it waterfall, iterative, agile? What is the business investment from a client perspective? And what's that potential return, both from a cost and benefit perspective? What's our estimated schedule? When will we hit the key milestones? What are those key assumptions we talked about just a minute ago? Don't need an exhaustive list of all assumptions, but we probably want to have at least the major key assumptions that are potentially going to threaten the project. I want to begin to identify the key risks and start to be thinking about potential risk mitigation activities. Certainly, as much as we can at this point in the game, identify completion criteria. So how do we know that we're done with a specific deliverable, phase, and how do we know when the project's complete? All right, we're going to move now to handoff. That's important to conduct a project kickoff, both internally within the project team and partners potentially, as well as a kickoff with the customers. So during this stage, you'll review the statement of work, validate it, make sure roles and responsibilities are clear, review the schedule, really walk through all those key elements of the statement of work. Major assumptions, are they still accurate? There might be some lag time between the time you built the statement of work and the time you actually begin to hand off, kick off the project. So you want to review the scope, you want to review those key risks. Detailed project plan development will occur during the handoff, and the work breakdown structure will be developed, and we want to get to detailed activities to support our deliverables. We recommend a deliverables-based project schedule and drive to the client needs. Again, just to reiterate, roles and responsibilities, I can't think of many things that are more important than clearly articulating who's going to do what and when. Finally, once you have the statement of work complete, let's get validation with the client. Let's be proactive in anything that's changed. And let's not avoid potential issues. Let's approach them up front. Main items to consider throughout delivery are incremental acceptance and sign-off. As mentioned earlier, very few games are won by the Hail Mary pass. We want a series of first downs and touchdowns. We want to get deliverables signed off throughout the engagement, throughout each phase. If nothing else, it's a formal way to get sign-off and engage the customer in conversation. Thought of any new risk? Are you okay with the progress of the project? Share that information and have regular engagement with your customers. Scope change management. We can't avoid change throughout the project, especially if it spans several months or years. So we want to get in front of change management. We want to have a formal procedure to document changes that occur. We want to assess those changes and get formal approval from a client perspective to adjust either schedule, cost, elements. You want to manage risk throughout the project. It's not a one-time event that you do at the beginning of a project and then have it sit in the shelf. We need to have periodic revisits of that risk management plan. We want to make sure that we're mitigating key risk and that we're prepared to implement contingencies as needed. Expectation management is a soft skill. Again, having periodic meetings, engaging with the clients, feedback and modifications throughout the life cycle. Last but not least, in terms of best practices, what do we do during closeout? We want to have a very clear transition plan to support. There could potentially be a lot of questions and potential issues as we move into production with the new solution. So we want to clearly articulate to the end users, who do they go to with questions? Who do they go to with comments? Who do they go to with concerns? Have that plan in front of all the end users and have the backup support that we need. Be prepared to answer the questions. Establishing a governance structure. Adoption of the new solution is often a challenge. We want to have a structure in place that measures who's using the new solution, how well are they using it, how many questions and issues do we have, reducing those numbers, etc. Looking for a continuous improvement process in the solution. What do we do with that scope that's been deferred? Well, ideally, we're capturing those good ideas along the way. And prior to closeout, we want a plan in place to address enhancements to the system and potentially minor bugs that we could live with during go-live. So we should have a plan in place that's agreed to by the customer and in place and ready to go post-live. How do we address out-of-scope follow-up activities? So from a sales perspective, this is really critical. You're probably going to identify new opportunities for sales as you go through the delivery process. Keep your eyes and ears open. Document those potential opportunities. Be in touch with your account managers, sales folks, and make sure you have a plan of attack to for opportunities to further help your customer. And last but not least, we want to validate completion. So did we deliver per the statement of work? Did we deliver per our deliverable criteria and definition? Did we deliver per the contract? Checklist items that you want to go through to make sure you have a happy customer and we've delivered to expectations. I'm going to pass the baton back to Gus.
Thank you, Jim.
Welcome.
So next thing we want to talk about is some practical methods for how we make the change. And one of the things I want to acknowledge is, as we turn the corner here, is some of these things oftentimes we know about, and some things we don't know about. But the things that we do know about is some of the benefits versus some of the trade-offs, right? So practical methods for change. One of the benefits of doing this is avoiding winning deals, but losing money, right? So if we make the change, we can win business and still do it profitably. Alignment of sales and delivery goals and expectations is one of the benefits we're looking for here. Turning reaction into proaction, right? So not waiting until that snowball starts rolling down the hill, but addressing some of these problems early. Jim talked about expectation management. It's a little bit against human nature to do that. Expectation management often means delivering bad news early. It means seeking pain early, and it's unnatural to do that. So a smoother transition through the phases and easier sign-off, right? So as we address these expectations earlier, I've seen a lot of really good results by emphasizing scope management early, emphasizing the process. The first one comes through in You sort of hold on to your helmet and wait for the grenade to hit, but when the smoke clears, oftentimes it gets a lot better. Obviously, high client satisfaction and increased follow-on business. Now, having said that, those benefits are offset by some things we have to think about in terms of striking balance. As you can see at the bottom, the graphic at the bottom of the screen here, it says good, fast, cheap. You can pick any two, right? So there's this question about why aren't you doing this already? If we know, having the right amount of investment in the sales cycle in terms of time, if we know having project management experts and subject matter experts at the table is a good idea, if we know the scope management formality is the right way to manage expectations, if we know that doing a bunch of first downs instead of a Hail Mary pass is the right way to approach getting completion criteria done, if we know there's disconnects between what was sold and the expectations up front versus what's being understood in the handoff, why aren't we doing a better job? And obviously, one of the answers to this question is how do I change the client's expectations? How do I keep my customers happy and be profitable? Are we able to make effective trade-offs to say we think there's a way we can spend the right amount of time in the sales cycle and not be working on the wrong opportunities? Or is it worth the time to really document many of the questions that Jim was asking about the statement of work? Do we know why we're doing this? Do we know how long? Have we made the assumptions? Have we looked at the risks? All these things take time. Is there a belief that this is worth doing? Does the organization believe that? Does the management of the professional organization get behind the delivery people to say that this is worth doing? Right. So the other question here is, yeah, we want to change it, but how do we stop the factory to put in a new conveyor belt? Right. How do we change the wing on the airplane without landing the airplane? These are difficult questions. How do we paint the bridge and not shut down the bridge? Right. These are all sort of project-related questions that align themselves with this question of how do we change the way we deliver our services, especially in an atmosphere where our customers have gotten used to the way that we do business, and they're happy and they like what we do, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it, or if there aren't enough things broken, let's not fix the things that we think are broken. And what's the real benefit of this? Can we measure what the cost-benefit analysis is? Can we demonstrate that by putting more time in the sales cycle that we'll get to a better place? Okay, so in pre-sales, we're introducing cost and investment and the risk of losing clients. If the sale process is too short, then it's hard to set it up for success. So these are things that we're trying to get into balance, right? With the handoff, I mentioned this already, but if we get out of denial early, we're bringing that pain to the beginning of the process. We're inviting potentially client pushback earlier in the process. We're not, it's easier to wait. It's easier to procrastinate. Okay. Again, the client satisfaction versus project profitability. This motivation of utilization or building the Taj Mahal affects project profitability. The Stockholm syndrome. I'm out with the client and I'm sympathetic to their needs, and they need me to build a perfect mousetrap, even though the budget didn't allow for that, and even though the client wasn't willing to pay for that, they still want it. And at the closeout, forcing closure versus achieving perfection is really a delicate balancing act. So these last couple of slides were really to acknowledge that this is not just about cracking open a textbook on best practices, but really acknowledging that it's a delicate walk to take an organization from being known for what you've probably been known for a long time, which is delivering great solutions that have great benefit and change the landscape of a client's operations, and to start trying to focus on, well, how do we get profitable and how do we do a better job of making the client happy, can look like it's flying in the face of that culture. And so what we recommend is an approach to change that looks at acknowledging what the current state is, right? So the current state of process, the current state of technology, people and organization, and governance, and casting that look of current state against where you're trying to get to, how wide is the gap, and what's the right way to make the change. So how do you look at current and future state? How do you do a gap analysis? How do you get the right vision for the organization? And how do we get a prioritized roadmap that steps an organization through striking that delicate balance? So what we have found out is there's often a rush towards let's implement process, let's implement technology, let's implement training for the consultants, and oftentimes to the detriment of some of the governance processes. So it's difficult to think about how to address the execution piece, the governance piece, all the many moving pieces that need to fit together in order to make this work. So we recommend a vision stage or phase in the project to make the change. So, you know, a finding of the current state, a vision of the future state, and a roadmap such that when we get to implementation of process, technology, people, organization, and governance, we're prepared to lay out the requirements for all those pieces, to develop the processes, to put the tools in place, to get the education done, and to do the deployment against a realistic view of current state, future state, and how wide the gap is, so that we get a good solution delivered, right? So we implement a governance solution, that we implement an execution solution, and that these pieces fit together. And ultimately, all of this works when there's adoption. And Jim talked about this when we talked about the you know, the PMO activities and the governance activities that occur really above solution delivery, right? What's management's responsibility for process improvement, for ongoing operations, for governing and measuring and reporting and making sure this thing's working as expected. And these things, you know, really drive change, and to adopt a solution really requires a formal approach to change management. And so this is our methodology that we apply to changing the operations of professional services organizations. So in summary, you know, most professional organizations have inherent challenges that can get in the way of successful project delivery, and we've talked about a lot of those challenges, right? You're good at what you do. We're used to delivering to a spec. We have subject matter experts that are very good at delivering on the technical aspects, but really there's a need to improve on the management aspects, on the business controls, on the scoping and the estimating and the holding the accountability to the teams, both from the client and the services firm standpoint. And practice and project management are the keys, right? So a formal approach is needed to modify the organization, right? So some of the methodology we just talked about with change, it does take formality, it does take a lot of thinking and planning, and in a way that ensures the client satisfaction and fosters profitability with the right balance. The change is worth it, right? So there has to be a belief in the organization that a change is necessary, that the change is worth it. There's got to be a belief in governance and project management, and a belief that it can peacefully coexist with the subject matter experts and the things that got us here. Okay? And then finally, effective and prevailing change comes through a clear vision, a proven implementation approach, and a commitment to adoption through governance. That's what we call vision, implement, and adopt. Okay, so in terms of next steps, I'll take a few questions in a minute, but I just want to talk a little bit about project assistance. We provide these kinds of solutions, right? So it's all, everything we do is about helping project-based organizations deliver better, faster, more cost-effective results, right? Reducing risk, maximizing the ROI, speeding realization of value, which is important, to have incremental wins, to strike that balance, and ultimately to have a methodology that drives change. So we do that with our vision approach with Microsoft, EPM, and SharePoint Project Server. We have training offerings. We have application development to integrate some of these solutions with accounting and human resources and the other systems you may have. Staffing these projects, we can actually bring project managers to your professional services organization and run the projects with you and teach you how to do this. And also can provide hosted solutions in the Microsoft Cloud to help. So we have a blog. We're in the cloud. There'll be some more breaking news on that. If you want a slide deck from today, there's some contact information here. We can share this information with you so you can help share it within your organization if you're trying to move your organization forward. Today's webinar has been recorded. It should be out there within 24 hours. There's a link here. Both to this webinar as well as past webinars, as well as registration for future webinars. And with that, we have just a few minutes left before 4 o'clock here. It's 3:57. We've got a few more minutes. The question and answer console is open, and I'll turn it over to Dan to be our moderator and let us know if we've received any questions yet.
All right, thank you, Gus, and thank you, Jim. We do actually already have one question come in, and that is, does this topic apply to all professional service companies?
That's a good question. A dangerous word. I'd say, in our experience, the answer, let me define professional services. I'll say the fast answer is no. It doesn't apply to all professional services firms. And, the professional services industry, if you will, is comprised of attorneys, accountants, civil engineering companies, construction management, doctors, and as well as technology organizations that run the gamut, management consulting. So the answer would be yes to project-based organizations. So that excludes, let's see, do doctors do projects? Probably not every day, although they might consider me one. Lawyers, yeah, they sort of view cases like projects, but that's case management. So what it really kind of boils down to in our world is most often people come to us with help with professional services if they're project-based. Oftentimes if there's a high level of technical subject matter expertise involved, and oftentimes if those projects are somewhat complex in nature. 1-hour projects like work order based or 1-day projects where there's a quick install in and out tend to be less involved in these kinds of solutions and tend to be more along the technical, fairly large projects, a couple of weeks to a couple of months, maybe a couple of years in some cases. And I would say certainly these concepts apply directly to those kinds of organizations.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we have another question as well. Does your vision approach apply to all project management, or is it tailored specifically for professional services?
That's a good question. Our vision methodology applies to all of the sectors that we serve. We serve primarily 4 sectors: IT project management, research and development or product development, including life sciences, professional services, as well as government solutions. And so out of those 4, professional services has its own very unique usage of our vision methodology. So for example, if I go into an IT project management organization, they're not as interested as professional services firms are in tracking hours, in tracking project costs versus revenue. So we do tailor our vision offering to the professional services firms, specifically around a lot of the proposal efforts, a lot of the pre-sales activities, and certainly the execution components as they relate to the management of financial aspects.
All right.
We're rated 4 o'clock. Do we have any more questions?
That's all the questions that have come in, and so thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.